Good evening from our headquarters in Kyiv. This is the Sunday show at Hromadske International. It's the only prime-time show explaining Eastern European geopolitical storm in English, and I'm Natalia Humenyuk. And as Russia keeps advancing on Eastern European neighbors and meddling with the US and with the EU politics, we are here breaking the myth and the cliché of what really Eastern Europeans think and explaining what they think about the future Donald Trump administration. We get a group of the prominent thinkers, policymakers, journalists from Ukraine, Poland, Georgia, and the Baltics. So you will listen more about this storm in Europe, and as well today we have this the great group of people. Now I would also encourage you to download our podcast on Mixcloud if you want an audio-only version of the show, so you can listen everything afterwards, and you can see the full version of the interviews as well, our Russian and Ukrainian content at our webpage hromadske.ua and en.hromadske.ua. So please, we'll be back in a second. We'll have our great panel. We'll start with Brian Bonner, who is the Kyiv Post editor-in-chief. So I'd like to introduce our guest, and as well Olena Trehub, who is the director of international programs at Ministry of the Economic Development and Trade, and also have background living in the US and knowing well what is happening and what is this change in Washington. Oleksandr Sushko is the research director at the Institute for Euro-Atlantic Cooperation and one of our Ukrainian top analyst on the international security, and Nina Jankowicz is the Fulbright-Clinton public policy fellow already for 10 months in Ukraine, and there are a lot of issues to raise. As also we would have great journalists and analysts joining us on Skype. It's Balazs Jarabek from Budapest, prominent Latvian journalist Paul Ransep from Riga, Natalia Antelava from Georgia, and also the head of the Atlantic Council Poland, we call to him from Warsaw. So probably there was inauguration this week, and probably we would start, we are asked this question: what really people in Ukraine was this time in the foreign policy, in the debates in the US. It played its role. Russia is more present as well in the US domestic policy. So what people should know outside of this region? What are our main concerns, besides that everybody, of course, is thinking about a possible reset with Russia? But what would be your turn, Brian?
Well, I think what Ukraine wants from Trump would be at least what he got from Obama and more, which is no recognition of Crimea, weapons, stronger financial support, stronger support for EU, NATO integration. Will he get it from Trump? I don't think so.
Olena, do you feel that you lived in DC, you're now dealing with international help as well. We've heard a bit of the panic mood prior to the elections. Now people are accepting. But what do you think? What is also we need to know? How would you explain that?
I think we should understand that Donald Trump is a businessman, and he looks at the money differently than a public servant would do. And if public servants are usually looking at foreign aid as something which is just spent, disbursed, how they call it, and they don't look at aid as investment, he would look more like it is an investment which needs to have return, which shouldn't be wasted. And that's why there is general expectation that he will be much more tough and strict about how American money is spent overseas.
That's an interesting idea. Oleksandr, probably the international security, transatlantic relations, will go in details into that as well, are something you're thinking, first of all, if I'm right.
Yeah, there is a first time since probably the Second World War when the United States has a president which has no enthusiasm about transatlantic linkage. So this is a kind of challenge to the whole architecture which we used to deal for decades. And I think that that will be, and we have observed for many times when Trump criticized not just European leaders, European countries with their policies, but also the whole system of transatlantic cooperation, including collective security. And so from this point of view, this is a challenge how he will adjust to the reality in which transatlantic connection and transatlantic security is the issue of the vital importance for people both sides of the Atlantic Ocean.
And Nina, as well, there is a bit of this kind of huge concern in Eastern Europe regarding all the human rights agenda and everything which White House was pushing. It somehow sometimes looks or sounds like the end of this, old liberal democratic agenda. How serious is that, and it feels?
Certainly, I think the Trump administration so far isn't setting a very good example of holding up what we think of as American values abroad. Certainly, we have to lead by example. I hope that folks in Congress won't let that happen, and that anything that the Trump administration tries to do against human rights and democracy around the world, we can count on the Congress to hold him accountable, although with the Republican Congress that may not be the case.
I'd like to, please interact, and I would just bring the topic of the Trump administration. We can show, of course, the future Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, the oil industry leader. We see his connection with Vladimir Putin. At the same time, in this cabinet and this administration, there would be people like the general. Oh, I'm sorry for that. James Madison. They are still new for us faces to remember, despite how you're preparing, and that brought some enthusiasm to the area. But what do you think? Really, can this his administration balance the Trump with compared to how concerned he is about all the advice he had given by the members of the team? Well,
there's going to be conflicts ahead because Tillerson's views are not the same views he expressed as a CEO as ExxonMobil as he did in his nomination hearings for Secretary of State. Mattis is expressing a classical transatlantic, pro-NATO, human rights agenda. Russia is a threat. So we either have a huge conflict coming, and the thing is, which side is Trump going to take? Is he going to take his view, which is we should do a deal and somehow link the removal of sanctions to reducing nuclear weapons, which is idiocy, it looks like, from both sides, or is he going to listen to these veteran voices around him?
But may I add, it is interesting to observe that actually when Tillerson was at the hearing and he was stating all those things which Trump usually does not say about Russia, he was asked afterwards, did you actually agree on those issues with your boss, with President-elect Trump? And he said, not yet. I didn't have a chance to talk to him. And then when Trump was asked about his nominees for the cabinet, he said, I just told them all to be themselves, to say what they think at the hearings, I want everyone to have their position.
Which could play out in a very strange way in these cabinet meetings, right? We know that Trump takes offense when people disagree with him very publicly and often embarrassingly. How could that play out in terms of personal conflicts? We have no idea.
Oleksandr, what would be also your, not like advice or analysis for the policy people here? Like, of course, there is this discussion. Ukraine had really put its support towards Hillary. There is the publication about that. It's also doubtful how influential Ukraine could be. But really, to rebuild the connection with the Trump administration, with a separate, maybe representatives of the teams, what's going on that in that regard? How do you see what the Ukrainian government is doing? And
I think that the government, if we think about the people who are responsible for this policy, they mostly understand what needs to be done, and they do not have illusions that it is easy. And hopefully, I don't know to what extent, but hopefully they also understand the correct ways of delivering their policies. And because yes, sometimes the knowledge you gave from other people may not work with the new people. And as far as I know, there were already some preliminary negotiations talks with at least some of the leading members of the cabinet. And so at least at this moment, there is no signal that the key members of the future or new cabinet try to some way to avoid Ukrainian dossier or trying to avoid communication with Ukrainian counterparts. So starting position is not so terrible. So the question is how to utilize the opportunities and how to avoid mistakes which may occur due to maybe lack of experience of dealing with these guys.
I would agree with you except for one thing, which was the day that Obama renewed sanctions on Russia, the nominee for National Security Council head, Flynn, apparently had several phone calls with the Russian ambassador to the United States, which is a bit worrisome considering the administration was not yet.
Well, now we know that there's still an ongoing investigation into the financial connections and the other connections between the Trump campaign and Russia. That's still active. Apparently, a lot of journalists knew it and didn't report on it. I think it's very doubtful for Ukraine, sitting here in Ukraine, that it's going to get this nation's going to get a higher priority from Trump in this Trump administration, given the priorities of Trump, which seem to be arguing over how many people so far attended his inauguration.
How missed would be Joe Biden, and really what would replace? Because it's not a secret that Joe Biden had a huge role. He had been calling President dozens of times. He had been here this week, just, some of days before, less than a week before the inauguration. So really, who could replace, that tie?
I think that this is an important question, and this is one what we will probably have in common between Obama and Trump. For both of them, Ukraine was not among the #1 priorities. And Obama, outsourced it to Biden. And this is 100% that Trump will also not so much be involved in Ukrainian issues. So most likely he will readdress or outsource this dossier again.
So we'll get Mike Pence, maybe?
Yeah, so in theory, what is the first version is Mike Pence, as he has the same position as Biden before. But we don't know exactly. We haven't heard anything from Mike Pence on this issue. And so this moment it is not clear if this is his interest, because you are correct that it was very sincere Biden's interest to deal with Ukrainian dossier. I know that the Pence views are rather good in terms of vision of what's going on in this part of the world. However, there is still a question if he is really willing to be engaged on the basis like Biden did.
For a moment, I'd like to move us to Warsaw, which is also a very interesting case because the current Polish government, puts Poland first, wants to make Poland great again. But at the same time, very recently, this month, they hosted the NATO troops. The Warsaw Summit was in Poland. And just right before, we've talked here with the Polish head of the Atlantic Council and the head of the director of the Global Wrocław Forum about that. Warsaw is joining the debates.
So I would say that when you're listening to the Polish government, Polish ministers, you can hear that the feedback, the first reactions are pretty positive. There is an expectation that Donald Trump will be a person that, and his administration will be not easy to talk to, but perhaps easier to understand each other or easier to persuade each other than it was in the past. Because what we are hearing from the Polish government is that at last in Washington, the black will be black and white will be white. No more political correctness, no more gray colors. It's going to be rather clear whether Washington is positive or negative towards things, towards events, towards next steps. So this is like a rather warm welcome. Obviously, Polish current government is pretty conservative, and obviously Poland first is what they are saying. This is very similar to America first of Donald Trump. So as we hear, they already initiated some contacts with the incoming Trump administration. They plan to invite President Trump to visit Poland later this year, and there are delegations which are already planning to go to Washington to establish good relations with the new administration of Donald Trump.
How it goes together with these remarks regarding the NATO, as Donald Trump doesn't sound as somebody who is really so much pro-NATO. Vice versa, sometimes it feels from his comments that the US is not this driver of the NATO any longer, and he challenged the status quo, while we have this new policy after the Warsaw Summit of the renewal of the rotations of the NATO troops.
Well, we would say that there are facts and there are declarations, and the facts are as follows. Following the Warsaw Summit, Warsaw NATO Summit of July 2015, a number of US troops, the Heavy Brigade, has already been deployed in Poland, and there are these 4 battalion groups which are to be deployed in Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. So this process is underway, and President Trump and his administration did not try to stop it and will not try to stop it. There's a big hope in Warsaw that although declarations are, as you described, Americans will stay in Poland, and then they will stay in the region, in the Baltic republics, because this is in the deep interest of the national security of United States to keep the soldiers deployed in the Central and Eastern Europe. So even though President Trump is saying what he says about the NATO, about we would say the idea of running a new reset in his relations or in Washington relations in Moscow, these are just the initial words, but the reality is a bit different, and also this reality is expressed by other members of Donald Trump administration, mainly General Mattis, a new chief of Pentagon, whose views on Russia and whose views on Russia actions and Russia aggressive activities are very different from official declarations of President Trump. So basically the current views in Warsaw are that the Polish government needs to discuss this ASAP, as soon as possible, with the incoming administration of President Trump, and will be able to persuade Americans to stay in the region, to stay active, because this is in deep own interest of the United States to have these forces deployed in the region.
Are the relations, what is the general discussion about the Trump connections or the Trump attitude towards Russia, if we also think about the current Warsaw-Moscow relations?
We believe that these links are not as close as we were fearing, that these links might be even dangerous for us, for the region, for Poland, for Ukraine, and the eastern part of Europe, and that President Trump, after he starts ruling the country, governing the country, his position will change, and he will understand that President Putin was kind, was friendly towards Americans at some times, but at the end of the day, President Putin is playing his own game, and the game is to win against America.
Polish society, which is not the secret at this point, is pretty divided. We followed the protest in Poland, and we have the part of the Polish society which is talking a lot about the human rights agenda, about the liberal values, and this is something which is also in the debate with the whole, Trump coming to the global political agenda. So are there any concerns, while as somewhere here also in Eastern Europe there are talks about that this administration wouldn't definitely raise the issues of the media freedoms, of the freedom of media, of the human rights, and things of that kind. So would it have any impact on Poland? Does it impact the Polish discussion?
These liberal politicians of Poland, they are obviously afraid that this is going to be very different in Poland versus US relations in coming weeks and months. We already know from numerous statements of some representatives of Trump camp, including Rudy Giuliani, who was in Warsaw in mid-December, a few weeks ago. He said that the United States does not see any reason why it should interfere into internal issues of democratic countries such as Poland. That might mean that the United States might lose some of its interest, or the whole interest, in how countries like Poland are being governed, what's the state of the rule of law, what's the state of the freedom of media, freedom of speech. This might cause some problems for countries like Poland, because over the years we knew that the United States was there, that the Americans were watching, and we are very pro-American society in Europe. Some polls say that we are the most pro-American society in Europe. So what we heard from Washington really matters in Poland. It's important to the Polish society, and it's important for the Polish government.
So we listened the opinion from Poland. Do you think, how much it matters to us?
I think it's a very hopeful view, considering that this president, besides all the misstatements in his inaugural address, has cheered on Brexit and views the EU as a trade competitor, has cheered on the Russian annexation of Crimea. I don't think this is a president. I think this is a president where kleptocrats, strongmen, dictators are going to get his attention. Human rights, not going to be on the agenda.
Do you share that? I'm like this, not the very cheerful.
He calls NATO obsolete. Okay, NATO is obsolete. You could strengthen NATO. I don't think it should be disintegrated. EU, we all know, is dysfunctional, but the solution seems to be unity, not every nation and every billionaire for themselves.
We actually prepared exactly that quote, Trump quote to the Bild paper that was this month about the NATO. It's obsolete, first because it was designed many years ago. That was the quote. And secondly, countries aren't paying what they should and didn't deal with the terrorism. So really, to what extent we can believe in the strength of NATO if probably the number one, it's not a probably, but clearly a number one, the most important country there, leadership is speaking of NATO at that terms.
I think that this is a reflection of the general approach of Trump, who does not believe in multilateralism. He doesn't believe in any multilateral structure, including NATO. He rather hopes to have some bilateral strong linkage to the country which is in his focus, and do not have a lot of responsibilities for the others. And that is why, for him, NATO is something which is not useless maybe, but not top priority, and that's what we will see with the rest of the international organizations, I think.
So what it means to this region, where we are not China, none of the countries in the region are not like Russia or China or any other big country.
Well, I want to stress that actually the sentiment about America paying for the security of Europe, it's not only what Trump says. This is what I heard many times on many occasions from people who work in Pentagon, even under Obama administration, that Europe doesn't pay for its security, and why do we need to pay for all these wars and security all over the world? And so I think that we should understand that, like, Trump may express one views, but then there is also some view of the people who will be in charge of his, security agenda, and there will be some balance there, and that's why I think it's too early to panic and say because he said so. I think that there will be just more pressure for countries to pay for being in NATO, more pressure to participate.
What it all means in practice, these talks, which were there for years.
Certainly. Well, I think the one thing, our one hope could be General Mattis, right? But we don't know, as we were talking about before, how that's going to play out in reality. I think the important thing to understand for President Trump is that NATO is not about dollars and cents. And his reaction to all of this, calling NATO obsolete because members aren't paying up, go to the negotiating table. Try to make that happen, right?
That's what he wants to do.
Well, then don't call it obsolete, because then that belies his lack of understanding about what the alliance really means. It's not only about defense either. It's symbolic for this region. It stands for freedom and the ideals that we've fought for since World War II.
Maybe it's his negotiation strategy. It's like receiving this phone call from Taiwan president, to negotiate with China. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's how he wants to start every negotiation, like hit hard and then.
But what does that do for the stability of transatlantic relations in the long
Oleksandr,
term?
what in practice it could mean to Ukraine? You for decades are really researching the Ukraine path to NATO. So what is in what are the practicalities for the countries like ours?
I would separate it from Ukrainian agenda, because Ukraine is not a part of NATO, and the most of assistance which Ukraine gets goes on the bilateral basis, on the initiative of specific member states of NATO. So I think that the Ukraine is a part of this big debate, but institutionally is not included. So I think that the issue of the costs and who pays will be very actual for Ukraine, not because of just NATO and this skepticism. But yes, I think there will be some attempts to revise, to look through the programs of assistance which United States provides for Ukraine on bilateral basis. And there will be no automatism in continuation of these programs, which are quite costly when it comes to the military exercises, to trainings of Ukrainian military personnel, and all these things. So I think that the Ukraine should be prepared to tough negotiations, to reporting, which has to deliver proper output of all these past experiences in order to continue them.
And we have with us online from Riga, Pauls Raunceps. He's a Latvian journalist, one of the leading journalists there. Currently the founder of the EAR magazine, now a columnist. He has a degree in Russian Soviet studies from Harvard University. So Pauls, of course, the 2016 was a very successful year for the Baltics. Finally, there is a rotation, troops coming to the eastern border of NATO. But what are the concerns? What are the talks? How do you see, what the people in Latvia, what the policymakers, decision makers are thinking, maybe in Latvia and also in the other countries of the Baltics?
Well, publicly, none of the politicians here are willing to come out and express their concerns. But behind the scenes, I think everybody is worried, maybe even quite worried, about what Trump has said both during the campaign and now his inauguration speech, where he specifically said that America first. He will look at all issues only through the prism of whether he thinks it's to the benefit of America. And the only context in which he mentioned alliances was in the fight against ISIS. It is a cause for concern here. Of course, we are very heartened, and it's good to see that American troops are arriving in the region. We just saw 6,000 about American troops and armored personnel carriers being come over the ocean, disembark in Germany, move on to Poland. Some of them will be moving to the Baltic states as well. So that's good. They're on the ground here. While they're here, it's much more difficult to move them out. But as I said, Trump's rhetoric is a cause for concern here.
And the relations with Russia obviously is the issue always from the Baltics. So really, how this thing, it's probably there is a hype, at least in the Ukrainian discussion, and not just that. So what still would be the top, how do you see that? What is the public thoughts? And also, would you also add maybe there are some other priorities to the Baltics? What do they really expect from the Trump, besides, really prolonging the support to NATO?
Well, I think his consistent praise of Vladimir Putin has not gone unnoticed here, and that's a second reason for concern. I mean, not only his policy of putting America first, but the fact that he's quite clearly very friendly or wants to be friendly with the Russian regime and sees it primarily as an ally in the fight against ISIS, and doesn't see all the problems that it's causing in our region, its invasion of Ukraine, the continuing war that it supports there. The fact that he doesn't seem to see that as a problem is very much a problem for us, and it's a cause for concern as well. A second thing that we are, I think, becoming more and more aware of is, obviously, when Trump got elected, we heard from a lot of people, he's going to put in good advisors. There are people who know the world, who will tell him the right things to do. He's inexperienced. They'll teach him how to act. It's not clear that he will actually listen to those people. And so maybe he will, maybe he won't. Maybe he won't pay any attention, and they'll be able to carry on the previous policies. I think the appointment of Mattis as Secretary of Defense is a good sign. Everything that he said is something that we find very positive. The incoming Secretary of State, if he's approved, also said positive things about NATO, although I think that his stand on sanctions was a little concerning. He wasn't perhaps as strong on those as we would have wanted, and I'm sure as Ukraine would want. So these are issues of concern as well. In this context, what the Baltic states are really looking for is to strengthen our relationships with the Nordic countries, with Poland, to look for cooperation on this front, because as Edward Lucas, the economist journalist who I'm sure you know as well, has written, if you look at the military budgets of the Nordic states, the Baltic states, and Poland put together, they're half as large as the whole Russian defense budget, and the GDP of these countries is larger than Russia. So in fact, if we can cooperate, maybe there's some ground for support there, but it's a new area and there's a lot to do there, so it's not something that would happen quickly. So it's that's a long-term project at best.
Okay, Paul, thanks a lot for your view from Riga and from the Baltics, and I think that is also an interesting thing to listen to how the different people in the region, share some of their concerns, and maybe sometimes the less panic mood than probably it was some weeks ago. So shortly before we have already the colleague of us on the line in Tbilisi, I'd like to ask you about, of course, the Ukraine, the Trump-Putin relations. In every second discussion in Ukraine, we speak about Putin or the Kremlin. And this time we've been at the lunch, which is the usual lunch at the Davos Forum. It was about Ukraine, but everybody spoke about Russia and Trump. So really, to what extent you think this discussion here is really, or at least everywhere, is probably overdone? To which extent the concerns are legitimate, and what really we should be concerned about? Anybody
I think that there is some specific standpoint of Trump towards Putin. It's clear that this is the only leader of the world which is treated by Trump with something which we do not fully understand. He is very critical on everybody, from China to France and Germany, throughout the world, regardless of the allies or the competitors. But Putin is very much specific in his rhetorics. And at this moment, nobody can really say what is behind this, because there are lots of conspiracy, there are lots of theories, and some people say that Putin has some compromise, and Trump knows about that. Some people say that this is just about some mental closeness of these two guys who are looking for, and there is a ground for the grand bargain between them. But at this moment, nobody knows. But what is true that in his each statement, when he mentions Putin, he mentions him with some specific emotions which differentiate this treatment from the rest of the world.
Brian, you know the mood of the Ukrainians, writing all the time about that, about the Ukrainian, sometimes even a fear of the Kremlin. So what do you say on that? Now, following the discussion in the U.S. media.
Yeah, we don't even have to go to the secrecy. I mean, anybody who expresses reverence for Vladimir Putin can just look at Vladimir Putin's record. It's a ridiculous stance for a U.S. president to take. Unfortunately, we've had this will be the third president who thinks that they can align interests and work, and it's going to end in failure if he really truly puts America first. Back to Ukraine, I think Ukraine is not going to. Bush was weak on Georgia. Obama was weak on Ukraine, but took the correct stance, but weak. Ukraine's not going to get more out of Trump, and it doesn't have the alliances that our Latvian friends and Baltic friends have. So Ukraine is going to have to become much more self-reliant. I think Saakashvili had it, who does actually know Trump, says Trump likes winners. Ukraine needs to be a winner. Ukraine will have no time to do this, maybe we'll fight corruption tomorrow. Ukraine is going to have to defend itself. Europe, it looks like, is going to have to defend itself and decide for itself whether it wants NATO or not, because I'm not sure, and Europe is going to have to decide what to do, and Ukraine's going to have to decide what to do if the U.S., if under Trump, wants to remove sanctions and some nations in Europe follow suit. Then what happens?
We will follow with that. I see you have something to add, but we have Natalia Antelava, who is editor-in-chief of the Koda Story from Tbilisi, Georgian journalist. Natalia, thanks a lot for being with us. We just talked also that former president of Georgia, Saakashvili, while he is in Ukraine, he already political figure, says that Trump favors winners and, also praise his connection. That was a bit of the Georgian note in that discussion. But in generally, so what are the main issues for Georgia and expectation from the Trump administration besides being self-reliant, as always?
Well, if anyone tells the expectation...
Sorry, we have a bit of the troubles of having Natalia. Let's see. Let's give her another try. Or when we can have it, when we have her, because she was waiting for a while, we'll get her into that. But just I'm listening to the director. If it's better to do right now, not to break the discussion. Okay, she's there. So.
We just lost.
Yeah. We are there, Natalia. We can
see your books.
We cannot see you, but we know you are here. So, okay. You can start. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, you lost me there for a second. I don't think anyone knows what to expect from Trump. I don't think expectations I don't think there are many expectations here. I think there is quite a lot of sort of general anxiety about which direction it will take. I think there is also a lot of excitement among some of the groups that have been very much underground in recent years, more pro-Russian groups or maybe not openly even pro-Russian, but groups that kind of dovetail in a much easier way with the Russian line of thinking, more traditionalists and so on. I think they're definitely sort of coming to the surface, and you see them speaking out more and so on. But I think as far as the government is concerned, I think they're kind of operating on inertia and probably just waiting to see what's going to happen. I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen with the U.S. ambassador to Georgia. I heard an interesting rumor today that apparently, and this is not totally confirmed, so I don't know whether it's true or not, but apparently the U.S. Ambassadors can choose between hanging pictures of either their president or the Constitution at the embassy. And there was some rumor that the U.S. ambassador here has hung the Constitution. Again, I haven't confirmed that with the embassy, but there is a lot of just a good illustration of kind of the general turmoil around this change. And I think everyone is kind of sitting tight. And I think one sense that there is in Georgia is that I think Georgia, after years of feeling quite sort of like a country that's been punching above its weight, I think Georgia is feeling quite small right now and quite powerless in face of these much greater changes.
And still, the Georgian administration, Georgian government usually used to have a really good connection to the Republican Party. So really, do you feel that it's also that they are trying to catch up, that they are really trying to find another way, if not Trump, but they have hopes for the administration?
Well, I think everyone is going to cultivate all the connections that they have. John McCain was here just before the Trump inauguration here and in Ukraine in December. So meeting everyone in the government, in the opposition, and so on, and reassuring Georgians, as he did in Ukraine, that the U.S. will stay loyal. But I think there is definitely kind of an understanding among the Georgian political elite here, on whatever side of the political spectrum they're in, that rules of the game have changed, and no one quite knows yet what this game is going to be. So basically anything we say here is very much guesswork, right? We just don't know what kind of president he's going to be. What we know is that the only thing that Trump has been consistent about is his refusal to talk negatively about Russia, and that's unprecedented for a U.S. presidential candidate as it was, and for the president-elect, and for now for president. But what will it mean in real terms? Will he get Tillerson as his Secretary of State? What kind of Secretary of State will he make? What kind of president Trump will make? We don't know. And I think there is a real sense here that Georgia is kind of just caught up in this like much bigger game, much bigger battle.
Natalia, thanks a lot. Georgia is not alone in that. That definitely would be the summary of today anyways. But we would like to talk about maybe figures and the funds and the money. Olena, you've been you're director of this international program, the Minister of the Economy. But in general, can really would be the dramatic change in the financial support towards Ukraine during all kind of programs, and not probably just towards Ukraine, but to Eastern Europe?
Well, definitely it may happen, because currently the top recipients of American assistance are, for example, 3 countries. It's Israel, Egypt, and Afghanistan. But regarding Ukraine, we are in top 10 right now. And we were supposed, according to their planned amounts that were appropriated by the Congress, we were supposed to move even higher on this aid agenda. But right now, you see, it depends on the power of administration versus the power of the Congress, how much we will end up receiving. Because, as you know, Republican Congress, they would support aid for Ukraine. And that's why we're looking right now at like $500 million package for Ukraine this year.
And there are other ways the U.S. is supporting the region. For instance, there are the media like Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, or the Voice of America. There were some talks that maybe there would be some change in that. Do you really, like as a media person, Brian, do you think that it's really possible that there would be some turn on that?
Well,
I mean, Ukraine, Radio Free Liberty played a huge role in the market of the independent media here. It's not the only country, but they are today probably the richest and the biggest out of the independent.
They are. And if he is truly a deficit hawk, I think a lot of this spending could be in danger. I'm not sure that he is a deficit hawk. I put my final faith in what has been bipartisan support in Congress for Ukraine, and I hope that wins out at the end of the day.
I do worry a little bit about the foreign assistance coming from that career background myself. A lot of Americans think when you ask them on the street how much does the United States spend on foreign assistance, they answer 20% of the budget. It's less than 1%. And I'm sure someone will read in President Trump about how much we spend, but given his statements about the State Department, how he thinks that there's fluff that can be cut from its budget, I wouldn't be surprised if foreign assistance would go. And I would just use the words that General Mattis used, I believe, which were if you cut the State Department's budget, you're going to have to buy more bullets.
Good point.
He already said that America gave hundreds of millions to Iran in that deal with the nuclear weapons, but America didn't actually give the money to Iran. It was like calculation how much money Iran would receive as a result of sanctions cancelled. But he already was talking about not wasting American money, and he's very critical about like every penny spent abroad, obviously. And there were already we are now living in the world of fake news, so I already saw fake tweets from Trump, which said that goodbye all countries losers, no more money for you, and there were a list of countries including ours, So, but it's fake tweet,
What impact it would have on Ukraine, which is, be honest, heavily dependent on the foreign aid at that moment, also why IMF, where also U.S. U.S. opinion matters.
It ensures some nervous times for policymakers, and but certainly that gives us a chance to see what and how we do use in our country utilizing foreign assistance. I think that, and this is also the question mark to the strengthening of the all negotiations teams. I know Olena is a part of some of these teams, but in many cases these negotiations teams are not strong enough in order to be effective when they communicate with the high-level counterparts to convince them that they spend money in the correct way. So this is the question to Ukrainian
And also,
government.
when you say aid-dependent country, there are different types of aid, and we're talking about, right now you talked about probably grant projects, which are just development projects, but what's really critical for us is like our financial bailout, our loans, macro-financial loans. And those loans are not given directly bilaterally by the states, but by multilaterals like World Bank and IMF.
And also one thing more, this February Ukraine would had the permanent security council in the UN, and there are a lot of hopes here by the politicians that it happens once in 2 decades, but also Donald Trump didn't talk really high on the UN. We also have a lot of doubts with efficiency of the UN today, but really can it also undermine these intentions of the Ukraine?
Sometimes it's easy not to have chairmanship than have it. And we had this scandalous case with Israel when the problem occurred just because Ukraine was a chairing country at this meeting when this was voted. I mean, on settlements when it was debated. So certainly the chairmanship in the international organization is a resource for diplomacy. However, again, we need to have a plan how to use it and for what. And there is no enthusiasm enthusiasm. And what we said on NATO, the same correct on UN. So there is no enthusiasm of Trump on these organizations. However, I'm sure that that there will be some continuity when it comes to the position of the United States in the Security Council. When it comes to, we were listening for the lady which is replacing Samantha Power. In my opinion, it is not enough to understand who she is. However, her rhetoric is quite close to the mainstream of American politics. So we will see.
And we would like also to have a view from Budapest. It's there where Balázs Jarabek, the scholar of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace at Eurasia and Russia program is based, and he more or less warned us in the very recent article that the example of the new feudalism, as he called it, in Hungary could be the case for how the US could develop under Donald Trump. So let's listen.
The European elites, particularly the EU elites, are very much frightened. There was a very emotional piece, news piece or an analytical piece in the Spiegel, in the German newspaper, exactly describing that the European elites are afraid of what Trump can bring. They also, I think, it's a bit afraid that they have to grow up security-wise. At the same time, I think the European elites are afraid of Trump simply because they did not expect, they pretty much expected Hillary Clinton, and this kind of face-saving, the period of swallowing Trump's victory still did not reach Europe. I think what we can expect from Trump is, so far, it's in the category of speculations, simply because there is a big overlap between what he's saying, or let's put it like that, what he was tweeting, as well as what his nominees, now, for example, General Mattis was already sworn in as a Minister of Defense, were saying during the hearings which were going on in the past few weeks. And there is a big discrepancy, so the question is, who is going to be leading?
What would be then the Hungarian view, the view from Budapest with a very special government, which is a bit like by the picture, is a bit of reminiscent to what Donald Trump represents, how then his administration is seen by the government, by the people who support the government, but obviously also by the society. And can you explain all this, your notion about how the Hungary could be the case study for the US?
Yeah, my theory is that essentially what we have been seeing in Hungary in the past 8-10 years was a so-called traditionalist turn. You know, that Orban, in a lot of ways, is condemned as not a Democrat, as an illiberal country or illiberal leader. At the same time, I think we can mostly characterize him and a couple of other leaders similar to him as traditionalists. These were essentially the first leaders, and like I even call Belarus 1994 elections when Oleksandr Lukashenko won a landslide as the first traditionalist revolution, where essentially by democratic ways or democratic meaning, those who are kind of the urban-rural divide and those who are kind of claiming traditional values were kind of winning or helped winning. Lukashenko, who obviously after this dismantled democracy, at the same time delivered what the traditionalists wanted, and this is a neo-Soviet republic. In a case of Hungary, this is kind of similar. The Hungarians were having a very turbulent transformation from perhaps the best form of the communist system, the Kadar communism, into what proved to be the worst capitalism, a very distorted market capitalism where both the multinationals were bringing way too many profits out, as well as the local capitalists were similarly not paying people well. The poverty is the highest, the corruption is one of the highest in the region, and this bitterness was leading to vote for Orban, who was kind of promising this kind of traditionalist turn, which put Hungary first, exactly, a bit of the economic nationalism, putting money into the national financial circles and national businesses, supporting state support. At the same time, and I think it's very important when it comes to both Hungary to emphasize, and when it comes to the Trump administration, that they actually, Hungarians, and the Hungarian government is also value the current memberships of the European Union, as well as NATO. I think those Western media analysis and Western media coverage, which are blaming Viktor Orban of being against the EU, is a bit overblown. They are very much for the EU, but
Viktor Orban was the one who is the author of this phrase of illiberal democracy, and he is considered to be somehow intellectually wise, the ally of Vladimir Putin, and that's very much correspond to the, to the way we see today Donald Trump as the, somebody who also could represent this illiberal agenda, though running a big democracy. So how then this is seen and discussed also, especially when the Hungarian opposition also look at the US and at the West as somebody who could help them with the reason or with not, and as well how then the relations with possible US relation to Russia are seen in Hungary.
When it comes to the Hungarian and Russian special relations, it's certainly much larger than it compares to any other countries in the Visegrad. The biggest direct foreign investment is going to be the upgrade of Paks, the nuclear power plant, which the the Soviets built a long time ago, and the Russians are supposed to be upgraded. It's a 10 billion euro loan, as well as a 10 billion euro contract, which is, again, the biggest in the history of independent Hungary. At the same time, you could see as well that the Hungarian government has been trying to change this relationship exactly after the Ukrainian crisis.
So that was the view from Hungary, and probably for the general summary, the question also would be, the support from the Western governments, and not just that. It was not always just about the NATO, the money, but it was always that you have the full package, You have the, human rights, respect to the freedoms, and then, you get something. That would also the push and explanation for the politicians why we need to do that. Just that would be our way forward. So how do you see with these rhetorics? We can see the development of the human rights agenda, of the media freedoms, because a lot of things we couldn't achieve. We should admit, be honest, if there won't be, some comments either from the Brussels or from the Washington.
Human rights and media under Trump?
Yeah.
It's not going to be anywhere close to his priorities. He's already started to engage in a long-running, or it looks like it's going to be a continual war against the American media, and I don't see him supporting freedom of speech globally either.
Do you feel that there would be an excuse, and that's exactly what the policymakers feel in this region, that they can kind of be, less concerned, less devoted to something they don't want to be devoted?
Well, it's
a danger.
Yeah, it's right now there is this discussion that we used to have the world which was led ideologically in terms of liberal democracies, capitalism, free trade. It was led by US and co-led with Europe. But right now, Donald Trump clearly stated in his speech, America first, and I care only about America. And then in Europe we see...
which part of America? We'll find out.
Yeah, and in Europe we see also governments who are also nationalist. And that's why it's a different kind of perspective. And that's why in Davos, that it was the first time that Chinese leader came to Davos, and he was speaking about
open markets,
open market, free
in
trade.
Praise of globalization.
So he is, and they were discussing. So is China the new global leader right now?
Yeah, and the leading of the capitalist world as well. So what do you really, to summarize, what probably in this regard would be something really to know?
Yes, there
and to
will be
raise again.
there will be a chance for America to prove, by the way, and there will be a lot of reasons to look how the system, the basically democratic and open system may defend its basics. So I think that it is not necessarily only bad, because now we have a challenge which American society, media should respond some way. And I think that maybe it will become, even becoming stronger. That there will be no more comfort life for this certain time ahead. However, I think that there will be some developments in America which will encourage the others. How to defend, how to protect, how to be consistent in certain values. Yes, probably in the practical priorities of administration, the freedom of media in Ukraine or somewhere will be not so visible. However, there will be continuity of the, I hope so, of the organizations, non-governmental organization based in the United States who are continuing to work, and hopefully they will continue to work globally, supporting their values regardless of the priorities of Donald Trump.
And Nina, your final remark.
I would just say that I hope that the Trump administration learns that not only would it be bad for the security of the region to stop investing in places like Ukraine and Eastern Europe in general, but it would be bad for the United States. It's bad for our image around the world to pull out like that. And it's something I hope they learn sooner rather than later.
Okay, so thanks a lot. That was a great panel with Brian Bonner from the Kyiv Post, Lena Tregub from the Ukrainian Ministry of the Economy, Oleksandr Sushko, who is a researcher at the Institute for Euro-Atlantic Cooperation here in Kyiv, and Nina Jankowicz is a Fulbright-Clinton Public Policy Fellow. So there were a variety of views from different capitals here in Eastern Europe and also in Kyiv, but also shared thoughts, some shared concerns, but probably also there would be the place and the room for the shared ways to overcome all the troubles. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.